When being pitched, every executive has this question: why am I looking at this?
Yeah. It's, there are, I think, a couple of questions that may never be asked that you sort of have to be able to answer with a pitch. And that is definitely one of them. I think that's probably the most critical first one. And it goes back to a lot of the other things we've sort of been discussing. It's executives have very limited time and they have very specific needs that they're looking for. They need to find content that's going to fit into very specific slots or buckets, and that's what they need to know. Is it going to fit or is it not? And that's really, I think, what the core of that question is. Why am I looking at this? Does it work for us? Does it fit? Is it in the price point? Can we utilize it? Can we make it something into an even bigger opportunity, etc.? But yeah, they want to know, how is this serving what we're trying to do?
And should the writer then try to put themselves in that executive's shoes and question why would they want to look at this? Or writers blind to that because they think that their material is the answer? I mean, should we kind of question, why would this executive meet with me?
I think if you have an opportunity to meet with a production company executive, distribution executive, anyone in that world, I wouldn't question it. I would just sort of utilize it as an opportunity of how can what can I do with my talents and help serve what you're trying to do in a way. The reason I say that is not to in any way not be true to what you want to write or what you want to create, but more, what do I have to do to make my script work for what you're trying to achieve here? Or what can I write to help, your company mandate or expectation of growth? You got to think of like businesses sort of like systems. It's a collection of small things that they're all trying to do in order to like just grow. They need films, they have money to spend, and they have to spend it on movies. They have to spend it on movies that are already completed. They have to spend it on movies that are not yet completed but are in development so that they can satisfy their client base. So they have deep pockets, not bottomless pockets, but they do have money to spend. And they're only going to spend it on so many movies. What you need to do is really figure out, okay, if you're only going to spend it on so many movies, how can I make mine be the one that's going to work? And having a mindset of like zero concessions and not being a team player is not going to make that happen. But being able to say, here's a couple of ideas, do one of these resonate? And then if it can, sort of be tweaked and, molded a bit and pruned here and there, then it can sort of start to fit into something that will work not just for the distribution company, but their client who's trying to feed into an audience or an end user.
Would you say most of the writers that reach out to you without representation, they've researched the genres that they should be pitching you? It's not like it's a total non-match.
In truth, it's probably more like 50-50. And if our company is getting, 50 emails, let's say, and 25 are just like, I wrote a script about XYZ that has nothing to do with what you guys do, we'll just politely decline before we'll just say no. And that's assuming, it's usually just kind of it's not going to work for us. We're not in that business. But if it is something that is sort of dabbling into the world where we work, we'll take a look at it. Now, taking a look at it doesn't mean that we're going to buy it or do business together in the immediate future, but it is an opportunity to sort of plant a seed and figure something out down the road. But yeah, we've worked with writers who've reached out to us blindly, and their initial scripts, none of them were that first thing that got made, but it showed us like, okay, this person actually knows how to write the genre well. And then when an opportunity comes up, we have reached out to them and said, like, would you write this? And they say yes, we do our deal, and they get paid, we deliver the script, everyone's happy, and we've done that with a couple writers. And then there's a few others that we're on good relations with, where they have the right scripts, but we just haven't found that project yet to work on together. But I know that we will, because it's just we have already established that sort of communication. And it's just a matter of time till we sort of figure out like, okay, this will work really well for that writer. Because every writer has their own style too.
What is a verifiable audience?
Verifiable audience is something that it's a way of describing a guaranteed viewer of content. A legitimate audience of people out there that you can sort of bank on or project upon. So what I mean by that is like if you have a book, whomever purchased the book would be a verifiable audience. Those are people out there who actually transacted on it, they bought it, so they must have had some kind of interest in it, and if you were to make a movie on that book, you could use that verifiable audience to sort of project the types of viewers you would likely have or the types of outlets you could likely go to. It's also, if you think about, ratings systems in terms of viewership metrics, that would also be verifiable audience. It's sort of people who are actually interacting with your content, engaging with it. You're able to sort of look at that audience as a core, define who they are, and be able to sort of say, if we're going to be making a project like this or in this space, who would our verifiable audience be to reach out to? Now, in a pitch capacity, if you are trying to sort of bring an idea to the table to pitch it, you would need to showcase that your projects have a verifiable audience. This is, I think, where it gets a little bit wonky for people who are sort of new to the industry, because they love to sort of take outlier projects, meaning examples of movies from the past that were extremely successful and that were sort of not representative of the average, but sort of like those mega hits that were like unexpected big hit films or TV shows or whatever. Those are the ones they like to quote a lot. But verifiable audience is actually more of the sort of boring average. It's sort of the predictable expectation. I think the thing people talk about with Star Wars, for instance, the original one, way back in the 70s, George Lucas said, I'm getting my numbers wrong. I haven't thought about this example in over a decade, but I think he was saying at the time, an average movie of that style made about $15-16 million at the box office. So if they could make their movie at around 10 million, it was going to be a success. Obviously, like the massive success of that and what it launched was never expected by anybody. I don't even think by George Lucas himself, but that kind of thinking that if we make the movie, if there's an audience that repeatedly watches this kind of content, what money does that generate? How do we quantify that? Where do they watch it, and how do we calculate that out? And then if you find that average, you can sort of work your way backwards to, okay, well then what movie do we need to make? How much does it need to cost? What kind of cast do we need to populate it with? And that's sort of the process.
How does a beginning writer know their story has a verifiable audience?
I think if you're working with an original story idea, it's sticking to those sort of goldmine or core genres I talk about a lot, because those are sort of the tried and tested and proven, buckets of programming that are always in need. So if you are writing a movie in that space, whether it's a tween girl romance or, a female-driven thriller, one of those titles, one of those projects, you're speaking to a core group of a core demographic, I'll say, of audience that likes and responds to that. It resonates with them. Now, there's so many granular sort of details within all that, but that's sort of the beginning point, is if you're sticking to a core genre or a goldmine genre, then at least you're sort of in the right building, so to speak. As you get deeper into it, I'm not saying write cliches. I'm very against cliches, but you need to be very true to what that genre is. So if that's certain types of character combinations, if that's certain types of story arcs, that I think is really, those are sort of the metrics of, am I sort of in the right zone here? And if you have that down, I think you're sort of in the right ballpark, so to speak. That's, if you're just doing it totally original work, and you're starting from the very beginning of, I'm gonna create a story here, I'd follow that mindset of work backwards. What does the industry need? What do television channels need? What do VOD platforms need? And what is going to help them grow audience and sustain it? And think about it at an independent level, not at big mega million per episode or multi-million dollar film level. I'm thinking more like smaller scale, low budget movie, under 2 million budget. If you're thinking more at that scale, that's where the real volume is that a lot of companies work within. That represents the vast majority of what gets produced every single year on a global basis. And if you're sort of working in that and you're working in the core genres, you're sort of feeding into that pipeline of what's needed.
Can you give me some examples of a cliche? A couple cliches that...
The truth is, like, you just sort of know them when you see them. It's the expected. I mean, there's so many jokes. I mean, look, I work in Christmas movies. Like, it's so many jokes about, big city girl who, just is having tough time in the city on her own. Her perfect life doesn't work, so she goes back to her small town. That's your cliche. And then, of course, she reunites with so-and-so who she used to know as a kid, and then there's some friction, and then they hit it off in the end and everything's perfect and it's a perfect Christmas. So for like a Christmas romance, that is sort of the cliche of the storyline. But that structure does work, so you have to find your differences within that structure. And this is actually where the talent of writing comes in, where it's so easy to like poke fun at that and say, anybody can write those things. Anybody can write a tween girl romance film. Anybody can write a girl in a horse film. Try it. Do it. Like, it's harder than it looks. And the amount of creative meetings I've had on that storyline, on how to make it different, how to make it unique, how to maintain an audience that needs to see that, but keep them engaged so they don't feel like they're seeing the same thing they've already seen. It's a lot harder than it looks. And there's a lot more involved development discussions and creative meetings than you would ever expect. From the very beginning, all the way through pre-production, all the way through the editing process. So it's when you're trying to reach a core verifiable audience, it's going back to Christmas movies because it's an obvious one. There's hundreds that get made every single year. Like, you're speaking to an audience. Like, there's a verifiable audience, and there's metrics from Lifetime and Hallmark and all of them that, they make a certain number of films every single year. And it goes back to, how do you get your foot in the door? Well, you think about, if they're going to spend all this money, which they're going to, I guarantee you, they're already working on their 2024 slates. How do you augment your work so that you're the one they spend money on? And it's sort of looking at that and saying, all right, that's the tried and tested expectation. That's the genre. There's clearly a verifiable audience for it. Now, how do I find those subtle differences that make the structure work, that aren't the same old boring cliche? It's the classic, like the same thing, only different.
Yeah, because I've noticed that a lot of these films, and I think this works, it's somebody returns back to the small hometown. Mm-hmm. And they're either met with open arms or met with resistance. But there's something about that seems like it's satisfying to viewers.
Yeah. And look, we've done it the other way. We've had the small town go to the big city. We've had the whole thing take place in the big city. We've had the whole thing take place in the small town. We've had it be that it's the lead characters dealing with a loss. They lost a spouse or a mother or somebody who was very close to them, and so they are feeling that separation, but it's emotional instead of like physical. We're just doing a movie now. We just wrapped on it, and it's about somebody who returns home, but not because she wants to. She's doing it because she's basically at a crossroads with her job. And she's going to go home to her small town and actually exploit something about her small town for work to return to the big city. Her intention is to go back to the big city, and she's just utilizing the opportunity to go there and do something. But of course, while she's there, she realizes that she can't do this, and everything's happy in the end. But the intention was very, very different than the same old, so I guess that motivation of how do you end up from point A to point B? It's those subtle things that sort of make a script or a story pop. And it's a writer who can deliver unique variations of that very consistently. But bring something new to the table that fits the mold every time. That's sort of how it works.
Sure, and it seems like those genres also transcend different age groups as well.
They certainly do. They certainly do. I think mysteries is sort of a good one. That would fall more into your female-driven thriller. But mysteries can really be, you can have your old lady mysteries, you can have your, young, fresh audience mysteries. There's a whole series of books that are aimed at tween readers that are mysteries. So that's definitely a genre that sort of satisfies a very wide spectrum, but you can have subgenres within it that sort of focus on one demographic at a time, yeah.